Pecoro.
Here.
Ms. Owen Simpson are excused. Mr. Fine.
Here.
Lockhart.
Here.
Miller.
Present.
Foskey.
Present.
And Pearlie.
Here.
7 present, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right, first order of business is the previous meeting minutes. Do you have any questions? Have a motion to approve? Second? Good. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Don't think so. Okay, thank you. Unanimous. Okay, we got one item here, the host community benefit agreement with Hecate Energy. Luke, did you want to say anything about it up front?
Sure, I'll briefly just state that this is a large solar project in the town of Clemens. We didn't have anything to do with the sort of approvals and siting, that has all happened. This was a project of this size goes through what they call the Article 10 proceedings with the state. It's a big, they've been at this since 2018. Where this comes in with us is the community benefit agreement. As part of their negotiations with the town, with the school, and with the county to an extent running through the IDA, they negotiated a pilot and this community benefit agreement, which totals $181,000 in net present value. We are proposing using those funds and sort of staying within the theme of the project in a way and creating a line in the economic development and planning department that would focus on energy projects within the county. So it could be energy efficiency, it could be sort of feasibility studies for future projects, and happy to answer any questions.
First of all, I like that idea. But I do have a question. I was not clear when I looked at the language of the agreement. It seems like what was negotiated was this 14,000 plus a year, but then they're going to make one payment of 181 because that's the NPV of the.
Exactly, and you know, we're of the opinion that it was a fair, 5% is a pretty standard and fair net present value number. And having the funding in one piece, you can just do more meaningful things with it than having 15,000 a year over a number of years. Yeah, we could probably come up with ideas that suited that, but it adds a level of complexity and just sort of, we just saw more value in being able to tackle more meaningful projects with the one shot. So. That is what the town did as well, that's what the school's doing, and that's what.
And they all used the 5%?
Yep.
NPV. Does that mean then that this agreement is actually a very short agreement? I mean, it has language in it that makes it out like it's multiple years, but then it sounds like it actually terminates once they make the payment.
This agreement, by going that route, yes, is, transfer the dollars, we are able to use the dollars again. What we're proposing is sort of, it just sort of made sense to keep it, well, it's coming from a solar project, let's invest it back into energy-related, energy efficiency projects.
Is that the same discount rate that the other,
Yeah.
that the school district and the town?
Yeah, yep, and candidly, they went first, so we were somewhat, at least from the discount rate, they had to stay consistent, but it's acceptable.
Start with you, Jim.
Actually, I think age before beauty.
Okay, you'll all get your turn.
My question is, so do you have a plan for what we're going to do with the money?
We have some ideas. I don't want to let all of the conceptual feasibility study ideas out of the bag because I think some of them are exciting things that we might want to announce in the future, but I can happily talk to you about it offline.
So is this part of this agreement that we need to do something immediate with the money? I mean, I think that's a good idea, but I'm just wondering, like, what made it, rather than just putting it into the general fund, we're going to do a project with it. That's the agreement.
Yeah, I think it just, again, you can do a lot of different things with it, but it just, there are a plethora of energy projects that we have sort of under development that could use these type of dollars, and given that it's sort of I don't want to call it found money, but it's money that we didn't necessarily anticipate having, that made sense to be able to advance. You know, I would think that about half of it we could put towards on the feasibility side of a couple initiatives that look at engineering around either energy efficiency or renewable energy projects that we've been considering, and the other half could go towards implementation, say, you know, an LED conversion project, for example, or, you know, an HVAC improvement project, things along those lines. So, again, I don't want to give away all the ideas, but I'm happy to come back and talk more about it.
Okay, thank you. So you're looking at, in the area of like energy efficiency, renewable energy, that's project.
Yeah, and it
The realm of
doesn't,
that.
it can be in that realm. exactly.
Okay.
Well said.
Go ahead, Joe.
Jeff.
Yeah, Luke, a couple questions, but first actually a follow-up to Sam, and maybe for you, Rebecca, but the projects that you have in mind, are those projects that then will be brought back to the legislator for legislative approval? Or,
I think that to the extent that they involve a contract, which most likely they will, they'll go to whatever the appropriate board, whether it's cabinet or legislature. Yeah, it's not like we would just be able to implement them.
Okay.
So yes, if it's over 100,000, of course it would come to the legislature. If it's in that cab range, it would go to cab.
Standard rules apply.
Yeah.
and then is a host community benefit agreement in this context, is that the pilot, or is there a pilot and a host community?
There are both, although the majority of the funding runs through the host community benefit agreement. The pilot is a much smaller dollar value. That's just the way it was negotiated.
And what is the angle, or how is the county involved in, how did the county get a seat at that table? I'm glad they did.
It
I'm
was,
just
yeah,
curious.
it was, you know, partially negotiated through our IDA. So they did work more immediately with the town and school, just because it was a local project, but it came through the IDA, and through that process, there's a split, a table, town, county, school, and each got a piece of it, and, the three taxing jurisdictions, and that's how we were at that table.
Okay. And you mentioned it was an Article 10 process. Notwithstanding that the state basically, was totally in control. Was the project controversial at the local level, or was there?
I don't think I don't want to say there were no detractors, but generally speaking, and you can correct me, legislature, if I'm wrong, it was fairly smooth, I'll say, relative to some of their other projects in other communities. I don't know if they just had more engagement here, but again, I'm sure not everybody loved it, but we didn't hear a huge amount of pushback.
Did it involve, and I know Senator Hitchie is big on the conflict of particularly agricultural land that now is being used for solar development. Did it involve the conversion of current agricultural land?
Yep. Not active, but, it was previously agricultural land.
But definitely, it was open space to begin with. I would just perhaps make a suggestion that since we're replacing open space with a built project, that some of the funds should perhaps go towards the preservation or the creation of, supplemental or replacement open space in that community or somewhere else in the county.
It's a great idea.
Do I
Mine Bush
hear-
keeps asking.
Do I hear some reference to the nature? and-
Well, we do have a measure on the books, Mr. Chairman. But, yeah, that's your prerogative to suggest, but I think it would.
Matt?
Yeah. So, I guess, observation, comment, and question. So it is, literally, this thing is just north of where I work, right? So I just decided to go out the back road today to take a look at it. It is very massive. It was land that was really not being used. There was very little controversy down there. There was a little bit of voice about it, but for the most part, it was just nothing happening on that land. So it was bringing money in, people were fine with it. It is very large, so anyone wants to come visit, it's massive. It's down a little bit in the ground, and it's huge. So I go to the question, comment-wise, So I'd love to see it more, I'd like to preserve it a little bit, but I love the idea of going towards the project, maybe less on the feasibility studies, I'd rather see it go towards actually doing something, right, than just studying doing something. That's just my comment on it.
I mean, these are
I'll
like
reinforce that
real
one.
Right. but-
essential
but
steps.
They are, but a lot of the stuff we know we can do already, and maybe where they need to be, but you have to do what you have to do, that's just my comment, Luke, right?
Details.
And then, question-wise, in county executive's presentation during the State of the County the other day, he had some beautiful video going out there. And one of the things I noted, it sort of struck me right off the bat, I don't know about the roof structure, maybe this is where feasibility comes in. Has there ever been any thought or consideration of using the Times Union, or the MVP, excuse me, that roof surface for solar?
Yes, and unfortunately, so the use of that arena, they have significant weight-bearing shows
Mhm.
that come in and rack all of their equipment to the roof.
Okay.
Talking very heavy, some of the bigger names, bigger shows that when we looked at the structural side of that, for that building, it didn't work.
Okay.
The added weight on top would have prevented certain shows from being able to go there.
Gotcha. It's not a flat roof either, it is, I noticed
Yeah,
it's
well, we
curved,
looked at it,
which you can do.
obviously
It's a huge
it's
space.
huge space.
That's all I saw when I saw the
central,
video.
Great location,
Mhm.
but I think there are some other buildings we can look at.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other, yeah, go ahead.
A little bit on what Jeff was talking about. I understand that the state drives the whole thing and very little say is certainly about by us the county. But would we, in the future, I think in the future times, but would we be able to have any leverage in the process to do something like what Jeff's proposing on these kinds of projects? Because they're coming up all over the place and I'm really concerned about them personally, the way they look and what they're doing to the land and stuff.
Yeah,
So,
and
what we can do to counter that, or make them do, rather.
yeah, I think the short answer is yes. I think you have to make a bit of a distinction between projects of this size that trigger certain, this whole PSC Article 10 process
Right.
that, in that case, 100%, we have the ability to actively be negotiating as part of, a host community benefit agreement through the pilot, et cetera. It's not that we don't on the smaller projects, I think we do too. They come to us for pilots. It's different with those. They don't go through the IDA, they go through a different process, but they still come to us. So we know about them, we have the opportunity to work with them to make sure they're using best practices around how they're using the land and decommissioning and things like that. And, I think we have perhaps some ability to work with them on community benefit agreements. I'd be wary, we'd have to think about that for every small project, how much extra burden, I guess, we want to put on them. But we understand it's the sort of pressures of land use between agriculture, solar, economic development, open space, et cetera, are real. And so
Thank you.
I think, yes.
Tricia, I just want to clarify something you're asking. Are you saying, because I thought what Jeff was saying was, now that we have this amount of money, spend some of it on open space, not just on renewable energy development. Is that what you were saying? Or are you saying something different about, like, the nature of the host agreement and what it covers?
I was thinking in terms of when these negotiations are taking place with the state, working with the state to put them in, can we make the state have to preserve some land or do what Jeff's saying versus using the money that you got under the HCA? That's HCA, is that right?
Yeah.
Using that, is there another way that we could say, because the state, in that Article 10, my understanding, they kind of dictate a lot of the stuff. And so can we say, well, that's fine, especially something so massive, and the state's getting something out of it, well, we can at least have them do some of the things that, I know Jeff's thinking about it, as I know Vicky's thinking about. I think we all are, you know, and how do we get those things done?
I know that conservation easements is one of the things that is often discussed
Yeah,
in these arrangements.
yeah,
So what Jeff is saying is not out of bounds of the kinds of issues that are discussed. In fact, you and I, we had an email exchanged, I don't know, over a year ago now, where I was talking to a developer and I said, here are some of the things that would make sense to offer to the local jurisdiction. In this case, it wasn't the county, it was the town.
right,
But the open space is part of
same
that.
principle.
And the town, and the locals can easily raise that, you know, we don't have to be the ones to raise it either. In fact,
Right.
sometimes it might make more sense, because they may have parkland that's adjacent to the
Mhm.
project they got.
But like what, I was surprised to hear the Leavenworth controversy.
Yeah, what?
I don't know, that surprised me.
It was pretty much none.
And there was a lot of outreach. It wasn't as if
I mean, I don't know the
it
project, so
slid
maybe
under
it's
the
so
radar.
good that,
Well, it also depends on what the land is being used for. If
It's-
it's like open space, but it's not being farmed as opposed to an active
no,
farm.
I understand what the, I kind of understand what the land is, but the solar panels and arrays are pretty intrusive on the
It's
environment.
it's very quiet back there too, though. There's not a lot of houses. It's right, you know, the Callanans is right there. Their quarry's right behind that, so it comes up to
Yeah.
there's a railroad here and a cliff on the other side, so there's only 2 or 3 houses in that area. It's not a place very many people see or go.
Barrero, you had your hand up.
Yes, and anybody can answer this actually, so it doesn't have to be Luke. Does Albany County have a set amount or a set percentage for community benefit agreements? No.
No, it's a case by case.
So you basically negotiate it and come up with the percentage?
Yeah. Yeah, and there's more, it's not a extremely common practice, but there's more than just dollars too. There are, you know, things related to workforce, you can do things related to hiring. It's, I think it's each project is looked at somewhat individually. And I don't think, personally, I don't think you would want to standardize it. I think you'd be limiting yourself a bit if you did that.
I will say this, in the town of Knox, and I know the supervisor, he's involved with Solarize Albany as well, and he's made comments about the different projects that he sees just in his town. The pilot can be quite different.
Yeah.
And that's, I do think that there might be some thought about what's reasonable and what isn't. But that's a little different from the hosting agreement.
I think, Mr. Chairman, I think something we should at least have on our radar, and my understanding of the Article 10 process is basically the state is driving the bus, and there's no role for the the town in a regulatory or a land use review, there's no role for the county, the planning,
Less.
it's
I wouldn't say no.
Yeah, there's a
Okay.
role, but we are not
significantly, not in charge,
Yeah.
basically. And I think the reality is, you know, these projects are, and to meet the governor's goal of 2030 goals, they're primarily designed to satisfy the intense energy needs of downstate New York, right? And so the closer these projects are to the city, the better, right, generally. But we have to recognize that between us and New York are counties that have a lot more wealth and power concentrated with people who have, you know, a lot of sway in state government, you know, Dutchess and Columbia and increasingly Greene counties, Ulster. And my concern is that southern Albany County might be the first place that they can get to that they're not going to have to deal with really wealthy landowners who don't want these things in their backyard. And I think, you know, obviously Legislator Smith would have a much keener sense of this, but, you know, we just need to be, as supportive of we are as solar, we just have to be on guard that, you know, the towns of Westerlo, the towns of Arena, the towns of Rensselaerville are not just sort of massive places where these things are dumped.
I would only counter that by saying that, yes, some of the power does go down south to the city, but a lot of it stays up here. And if we are going to meet our goals, we have to use a lot more renewable energy in upstate New York.
Absolutely, but when you look at the number of energy consumers in the city of New York and the ability of the city of New York and the surrounding areas to provide renewable energy, the disproportion, the ratio is so out of whack that it has to be made up in upstate New York. Upstate New York has got to be the
That's where a lot of
place.
the offshore wind is gonna go. That's gonna go to New York City.
Right.
Unless we get some out of, off of Ontario and Lake Erie.
And we're getting a lot of jobs right here for that, so.
Yeah, we've got it.
That point I know.
Yeah, we're getting great jobs.
Just-
Okay, any other questions?
Motion to approve?
Okay, is there a second?
Second?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes.
I hear it, I just want to be sure. Nobody's dumping on this.
Someone suggests we should adjourn. Is there a motion?
Oh, yeah.
Motion to adjourn. Really, we're just getting money.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Yep.
So